Hello one and all, Jasper here, and I've talked about Game of Thrones as an RPG as well as a military strategy game, so let's change things up with a new type of game. What if Game of Thrones was a fighting game? Now, I won't bullshit any of you. Fighting games are not my go-to for enjoyment, especially when compared to RPGs, but I can sit down for a game of Soul Cal, Mortal Kombat, or Tekken and somehow button mash my way through a game. And this knowledge does help me with some of the lingo, such as shotos, grapplers, and fucking zoners. God, I hate them. So now that you understand my knowledge level, we can get started in talking about what this fictional fighting game would be like. Starting with, what kind of fighting game? Do we go full 2D like some of the classics? 2.5D, which is most of them these days? Or a full-on 3D fighting game? Well, since the most familiar game to me would be Soul Calibur, let's go 3D fighting. Plus, Soul Calibur's gimmick is having a bunch of different fighters using unique weapons rather than just fighting styles. So while I'm at it, might as well use these characters from the game as examples for some of the characters from the show I want to bring in. Though, as a casual fighting game enjoyer, the most important thing to me is the character roster, especially of an IP I'm a fan of. And if my favorite character doesn't make it in, what's the point? Why should I give a shit about Dragon Ball Sparking Zero when its pitiful 181 roster does not have Devilman? So because of that, this video will mainly focus on the roster of this fictional Game of Thrones fighting game and who I think would be best to put into it. A few rules though. First, the roster size will be 20 characters. I could talk about how I looked over releases for new games and their starting sizes at the time to keep things realistic, as well as took into account the Game of Thrones IP if it's popular enough to develop that many characters. But honestly, I just looked up the roster of Soul Calibur 6, which had 21 characters, and I felt 20 was a decent number. Second rule, I am going to make sure that I fill out different fighting archetypes and who would fit them best before I start throwing in my own personal favorite options. So Stannis and Tywin have to wait in line before even having a chance to be let in. Third rule, we are prioritizing characters from the original Game of Thrones TV show. We want this game to sell. We need names and faces that people are going to actually know. I would love to have fellow Short King Sir Shattrich to be a playable character, but I doubt most book readers remember the guy, so obviously show watchers don't know him. Understand? Then I'll stop wasting your time. Let's start with an all-around character, arguably the most important in a fighting game that serves as the jack of all trades, master of none. It's the kind of character that's good for a beginner, as it gives you a little bit of everything and it can help guide you to a more specialized playing style. Also, I notice most of the time it seems to me that the mascot, the main character, the protagonist of the series, is the one who fills this role. Ryu in Street Fighters, Mario in Super Smash Bros. So I think it only makes sense to pick the protagonist of Game of Thrones. But now, who is the protagonist? Well, some might say Tyrion, some might say Dany, but really, neither could fit this role even if they were the protagonist. So obviously, this goes to...
Ollie, bring me my sword.
I mean, come on, could it be anyone else? Jon Snow is one of the most consistently popular characters, some might say overrated, but anyways, I can't even deny that he would fit the archetype of the jack of all trades better than pretty much any other option. I mean, his go-to sword is a bastard sword, which is already an in-between a long sword and a great sword, so he could probably use a little bit of movesets from both of these fighting styles. I picture him honestly having a similar moveset to Mitsurugi, who at least to me felt like the most balanced character in the roster of Soul Calibur. But with that one squared away, we now have the grappler class, which is kinda difficult considering this is a fighting game with a bunch of weapons. But now, when you think of grappler classes, it's usually the biggest and toughest son of a bitch you can find. And after that description, I'm pretty sure you all had the exact same character come to your mind as I did.
Smash their head in like this!
With his size and strength, Gregor Clegane is probably the best pick to fill the grappler role. I mean, just look at how he took down Oberyn. wasn't with a weapon, I'll tell you that. Though I admit there are some aspects that made me hesitant to pick him for the role. For example, considering the grappler fighting style is hands-on, whereas he uses a massive sword and shield, it doesn't give him a lot of room to grab someone. Plus, he would have the longest reach, or close to the longest reach in the entire roster because of his size and the length of his sword. But I think we can make some creative changes. First off, get rid of the shield, so that way he has a free hand to actually grab onto people, and slow down his attack, so even though he has the long reach, you still want to get in close and focus on his grapple attacks. I could see him as a mixture of Astrogoth and Nightmare, big wide attacks that you can see coming from a while away with much faster grabs to get the opponent. Alright, done with the Chad Sigma Grappler archetype, and now we move on to the Pussy Simp Zoner archetype. Fuck, I hate these guys, always hiding on the opposite side of the screen, spamming their long-range attacks. Though there are often two types of zoners depending on the game, a projectile zoner and a normal base zoner. For now though, let's focus on a normal version and tackle projectiles later. And of anyone you could fit into the normal zoner class, you would need someone with longer range than Gregor. And I think the perfect choice is the guy who killed Gregor.
I will be your champion.
He is one of, if not the only character who uses a spear, so he kind of wins by default. Though I will say, because it is somewhat known he is skilled with a wide variety of weapons, you could also make him a stance change character, weapon swap kind of style, or some gimmick along those lines. But since in both the books and show we only ever see him use a spear, it makes me prefer to keep him as the zoner with only the spear. There are actually a lot of options for this fighting style, from Kilik with his bow staff and god damn it, Seong Mina with her Naginata, which might translate a little better because it's a pointed weapon on the top. Though, if you want a hint at how Oberon is skilled with different weapons, then Hilda, who uses both a spear in conjunction with a short sword, might be just what the doctor ordered, though I prefer the previous two examples. That's the normal zoner done, but what about a projectile zoner? You might think it has to be an archer, right? Am I going to grab Ungai, who has 2 scenes in the show and never appears again? Maybe. But like I said, I'm prioritizing popular characters, and there is one well-known character who, if we want to get in, I think can only be a zoner. So let's make way for the Mother of Dragons.
Dracarys.
Now, unlike most of the other characters in this video, I don't really have an example that I think would fit Dani here. I see her as having her 3 dragons still as babies or teenagers resting on her shoulder, arm, and leg, with her attacks having them shoot gusts of fire with some fireball action for when she's able to put more distance between herself and her opponent. Maybe the dragon on her shoulder can help her with movement, flapping its wings when she dashes or jumps, which actually sounds pretty sick, not gonna lie. Also, we benefit from getting a woman into this game. Our pickings are a bit on the slim side. Most games seem to have between a third or half of the roster rocking that extra X chromosome, but I think we'll be lucky to hit 1/4. That's only a problem though if Sweet Baby Ink starts annoying the piss out of me. Just don't point out the lack of minorities, okay? Alright. The bitch-made archetypes are done, and now we can look at my personal favorite fighting style, the Rushdown character. Similar to a grappler, but they tend to have a lot more mobility options and are not quite as dangerous as a grappler when they get in close, but still pretty fucking dangerous. Compared to the previous archetypes, I think you could fit almost anyone into this playstyle, but to get the perfect character, I think we just have to look to the west to find the best choice.
I'm going to open your lord from balls to brains and see what Starks are made of.
Hot-headed, arrogant, and rocking the classic sword and board combo, a Rushdown fighting style I think would be perfect for this sister fucker. Having a shield despite being a defensive item often encourages and benefits from a more aggressive fighting style, especially when faced against opponents with longer range. There isn't a great option to compare him to, however, as for some reason the sword and shield combo is dominated by more feminine characters in Soul Calibur, including Patrolus, who emulates his mother in fighting style. Lizardman maybe could work, but that still needs a lot of changes, so Jamie would need to be built from the ground up. Now, here is an interesting archetype that might not be possible in the Game of Thrones setting, but damn it, I'm gonna try the puppet archetype. And to greatly simplify it, the way this character works, it's pretty much controlling two fighters at the same time. The first few ideas were big man and short person team-ups. Bronn and Tyrion would be an example, with Bronn being the main fighter and Tyrion being the summoning support, as well as Sandor and Arya. Heck, you could also have had Jon or Robb fill this role as well, with their puppets being their direwolves. But there is one character in the story who is known for summoning monsters to do their bidding. So can I really, in good conscience, give it to anyone else?
For the night is dark and full of terrors.
Come on now, imagine the Red Woman with the dark shadow of Stannis standing by her side in battle, dishing out damage as well as all sorts of magic to her opponents. Plus, this is a way to guarantee Stannis gets in the game, because honestly, I don't know if I can justify his inclusion otherwise. And yes, I know the Night King could also very easily fit into this role as well, but honestly, I need him to fill the next slot for me. One character archetype I was struggling to think of anything that could fit is the Trapper. I mean, this is a fairly realistic medieval setting, and it's not like we have any characters whose choice of weapons are bear traps, so I felt like I might have to shove this one to the side, until I realized what could be a better trap than having zombies just shoot up from the ground. The Night King could honestly fit in a lot of roles with what we know about him. Zoner, Puppet Master, Trapper, and hell, maybe even Grappler. But I think he is the best option for the Trapper playstyle, or at least a Trapper with mixed in aspects of the other archetypes to fill this role. And besides, we have to have the main baddie of the series in the game. That's like having Street Fighters without Akuma, or Mortal Kombat without Shao Kahn. Makes the game feel half-dressed. Alright, we are on our last archetype, and yes, I know there are more, but honestly, we either don't have a character that can fill that role, or I don't know what it is. For example, the Stance character, its main shtick is being able to change its fighting style. I think the only one who could fulfill that role is Oberyn, so let's call him our normal Zoner stance changer if you really want that type. Fine, that's good. But also the mix-up fighter. I just don't get it. And a part of me thinks even if I did get it, there isn't a good option in the franchise for it. But hey, if any of you have any ideas, leave a character down below as well as what their archetype would be. With all of that settled, the final archetype that I came across that I think could fit into our game is the hit and run type of character, dashing in to do damage but able to quickly get back and away if things get too airy. And it's only fair to give this to the only character in the entire franchise who's ever even been in a fighting game. Come on, it fits perfectly! And it's the main reason why I decided to not use her and Sandor as the puppet characters. Using Needle, which is already a fast weapon, and taking advantage of her small, agile body, I honestly don't think she could fit any other type of fighting style other than hit and run. I mean, can you picture this 5'0" bitch as a grappler? Come on! As a starting frame, the best comparison would probably be Amy, a small girl whose main gimmick is sticking them with the pointy end. Fits like a glove. Finally, the archetypes are done. Now I can have more fun by grabbing characters that I just want to be in the game. So far we have 8 characters of our 20 roster filled, but we should probably think about other aspects of the franchise that need to be filled. For example, I think we need at least one representative from every single major family. We got a Stark, Martell, Lannister, and 2 Targaryens. That means we still need some representation for the Tullys, Arryns, Baratheons, Tyrells, and Greyjoys. Actually, cut the Arryns. Look, I'm sorry, but who the fuck do I pick to represent the Arryns? Sweet Robin? I know he had a glow up in the show, but the fucker hardly counts as a character. Jon Arryn dies before the series even starts, which leaves me only book lore characters. Maybe you could justify Robin as a Joe character akin to Dan Hibiki or Phoenix Wright, but that is the only way I would allow it. So let's tackle the other 4 families before I sign off on sweet baby boy Robin making it in. Starting with my favorite of the major families, the Tullys. It won't surprise any of you when I say we kind of only have 2 options when it comes to the Tullys, since Hoster is a sickly old man at the start, and Catelyn and Lysa are noble ladies who don't fight. While I would love to get Chadmere into the game, the obvious choice is obvious for a reason. So, come on out.
As long as I'm standing, the war is not over.
Ever since this guy joined up with Robb Stark in his war, he proved himself to be a massive asset to him in both a tactical and physical sense, taking care of pretty much any scout from the Lannisters to keep their forces hidden, and likely counseling Robb during the War of the Five Kings. He very well could be one of the best military minds in the franchise, but doesn't get the credit he deserves because the grass-pissing Robb Stark takes all the credit. Let's stick with the tease and talk about the Tyrell candidate, and I won't waste your time by pretending like there's more than one option.
I will put a sword through his righteous face.
Yes, I know Garland Tyrell is the older and better fighter of the two and is way cooler than the sword-swallowing pillow prince Loras, but counterpoint, Loras made it into the TV show and Garland didn't, so because of that, he edges out ahead of his older brother. But there is another reason. In this day and age, you want your game to stand out compared to others. You need a gimmick, something that no other game has. Aside from the IP, we don't have a lot. But what if we added this? A jousting mechanic at the start of the fight. The two players with their characters right against one another, and depending on how good one does, it can give a player a handicap in the coming fight from having their opponent lose health or maybe being slower. This can introduce the aspect of some characters being quite dangerous during a joust while not being the most threatening in an actual fight. Loras can fit this brand new gimmick archetype. Jouster. Look, what else would I fucking call it? I have a strong feeling that almost everyone would hate it, but fuck you, I like it, and I bet we can easily turn it off in the settings, which will probably drop Loras down to the bottom tier. Okay, now we got the Greyjoys. Obviously the prime options are the uncles, Victarion for being a beast on the battlefield, and Euron, who is being set up as a massive antagonistic force with a pinch of eldritch evil magic. But one didn't make it into the show, and the other show counterpart is somehow an even more gay Jack Sparrow, which leaves us with Balon's living seed as options. And to make sure we hit those DEI requirements, the pick's obvious.
Give me my brother, and no more of your men will die.
Now, I'm not just being sexist here by picking Asha because of her gender over Theon. There is another reason, and that is Asha can bring in a new fighting style to the game that Theon can't. She likes using axes, specifically throwing axes, so this could make her a bit of a zoner, as well as making her so far the first dual-wielding character, as I could see her using an axe in each hand rather than just one weapon or an axe and shield. Only one major house has no representation now, and who would be better than the most hated character in the entire franchise?
I'll give him a red smile from ear to ear.
Of course, it has to be the rightful king to Westeros and the Iron Throne, the just, the boy king, Joffrey Baratheon. Nah, I'm just fucking with you. Here's our actual Baratheon representative.
Do you think it's honor that's keeping the peace? It's fear. Fear and blood.
How could I not add the Demon of the Trident? Though I do want to be clear, this is the young Robert. I was really close to not choosing him, though, because I have some plans after we go over these 20 picks, but I'll save that for later. Regardless, Robert would be a fine addition, bringing a new fighting style, that being his Warhammer, and there are plenty of characters you could base this moveset off. The obvious pick would be Astaroth, but I also want to throw in Rock. He had some good times with him in Soul Calibur 4. Fun grab, swinging a massive weapon, hitting an enemy with his head. What's not to love about it? Alright, that's 12 characters now, meaning we have 8 slots left. I will say, I think I've been accidentally a little racist, which is crazy because usually I do that on purpose. So far, we only have residents from Westeros. Maybe we should look to Essos for fighters that we can put in. But who to pick first? Wait a second. First. The first.
What do we say to the god of death?
Variety is the spice of life, and characters who live across the narrow sea can bring that variety. And while I will be the first one to say that some of the fans write Sirio's dick harder than Loris Road Renly's, I think he does deserve to be on this list by bringing in another fencer who can be less aggressive and more defensive. Raphael's fighting style would probably be perfect for the Bravo Sea Water Dancer. There are plenty of other fighters we can grab from Essos while we're here, like the greatest fighter in the shit Mongolian faction. Who better to show off the culture of the Dothraki than Khal Drogo? Really, he's the only one we can pick. Who else do we have as a choice? Rakaro? Be honest with me, how many of you would have been able to name him if I showed you the actor? Or if I asked you to name another Dothraki character that wasn't Drogo? Back to Drogo though, I see the guy as another hit and run kind of character, perhaps with a glass cannon build given his minimal armor. It would make a lot of sense, maybe along the lines of Huang or, fucking hell, Yuang Xiong, fuck these names, these guys' fighting styles, along with a similar weapon. I know I've been prioritizing the show for this game, but I really don't like the design they went with the Rorak in the show. It really needed to be an exaggerated scimitar. Fucking hell though, so many swords, curved swords, big swords, short swords, 2/3 of this roster use swords. We need some variety, so let's throw in another spear guy.
Os vilivacho simor golejo, aiske zi skodo os vilivezi simor golesi, jim sidori, jajalen tot, ajivi kezari.
Look, I'm sure this can be done, but I have no examples for this character. I could not find a single character who fights with both a spear and a shield in a fighting game. Maybe they do exist, but I sure as fuck don't know where they are. I see Grey Worm as a guy in a very defensive footsie-like character, good at medium range, able to hunker down behind a shield and take shots at the opponent. I wonder if some sort of stance could be interesting, where his attacks are much more limited, but he is almost always blocking, making it very difficult to get a hit on him as he chips away at you. Let's grab one more character from Essos, and really, I think it's the only other legitimate option.
I come from nothing, and before long I will return to nothing. Let me kill this man for you.
The final fighter I'll be pulling from Essos is none other than Dario Naharis, a man who has apparently fucked more women and killed more men than there are stars in the sky. I can imagine us getting some pretty damn good banter and insults with the other characters. Also, I could see him having an extra skin. I didn't mention this, but I was thinking the show versions of these characters would be the default skin, while the alternative would be book-accurate skins. But this guy would of course have an extra skin to show off both of the actors who portrayed him. Wait, shit. Does that mean Gregor Clegane needs 3 show skins? Fuck! Also, we have to give him the Robert Strong skin. Of all the characters who have a lot of skins, I did not expect Gregor to be this one. I thought only Dany would be able to beat him with all of her different costumes in the series. I'm already sick of Essos, so let's head back to Westeros for these last 4 characters, and I'm really starting to feel the pressure of making sure those who need to be in the game get in, and I'm starting to realize no matter what I do, I am fucked. I'm kind of happy I decided to only focus on the show, because if I allowed one book character into the game, that opens the door for tons of others. People will be demanding Victarion, Garland, Coldance, Areo Hota, and yes, Areo is a book-only character. You are not going to convince me that clean-shaven motherfucker who was killed by a knife smaller than I used to cut my steak with is the same guy as the book. Piss off. We've been ignoring a lot of obvious picks though. And we're going to keep ignoring them because while writing this exact sentence, I forgot about a very important faction. The Wildlings, or as they like to be called, Free Folk, but that's a dumb, boring name, so we're going to stick with Wildlings. And there are only 2 people who could come to your mind when you think of the Wildlings.
But if you lie to me, I'll pull your guts out through your throat.
A big burly man to fight against and take down every kneeler that he comes across? Yeah. There are better fighters like Mance, technically, but the entertainment and raw savagery that Tormund has, well, few can bring that to the table. Though I did mention 2 Wildlings. Seems reasonable that they both make it in.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
Here we go, the last kiss by fire, Ygritte, and another fucking zoner, god damn it! Aside from Arya, every single female character is a long-distance combatant. Asha, Melisandre, Dany, and now Ygritte, who obviously will mostly rely on her bow and arrow for fighting. Granted, bringing a bow and arrow to a fighting game does shake the table a bit, but what's the point when almost all the bitches are so far backed away they're treating you like you're their abusive husband? We need a woman who isn't afraid to walk up to you, dish damage, as well as take a beating. Oh shit, it's kinda obvious now that I say it out loud.
I will shield your back and give my life for yours if it comes to that. I swear it by the old gods and the new.
The Mountain with Tits is here, and she is looking to show everyone that she is just as good as any other man around her. An easy pick, and now there's only one spot left of this 20 character roster. I'm only allowing myself to pick one more person. Who could it be? Are you confident that the person you're thinking of right now is that choice? I think there's a pretty good chance that it is.
Even now I could cut through the five of you like carving a cake.
The bold, the brave, the badass, but also the old Barristan Selmy, one of the greatest knights still alive in the series. Fuck off with that show fanfiction. The day Barristan gets killed by a bunch of nepo babies is the same day I move out of the US. Either way, I would be a damn fool if I didn't include arguably the greatest fighter to ever live. I have to say, I'm pretty happy with the roster. Yes, I know there are plenty of book characters that probably should have been put in. Hell, there are some show characters I probably will get skinned alive for not having. Sandor, Bronn, Beric, and I know some of y'all are pissed I didn't throw in Tyrion and give him the same moveset as cheap-ass Yoda. But you know what most games have these days? DLC, with tons and tons of characters to introduce. Maybe the characters you're begging for made it in with these DLCs I came up with. They didn't. Well, maybe 2 of them did, but most of these characters probably didn't come to your mind. But let's start with the DLC that has the best chance of getting in a missing character. Really fast, this script is almost 10 pages long, so I'm going to have to sprint through these characters at a much faster pace. First DLC idea, the 5 Kings, which unsurprisingly will include Joffrey, Robb, Stannis, Renly, and Balon. 3 of these characters make perfect sense, what with Stannis and Robb being quite popular and beloved characters, along with Joffrey, who I am sure people will love to cut to pieces in this game. Renly and Balon are weaker options, I will admit. Renly being one of the first kings to die and not accomplish much in the grand scheme of things, and Balon, despite having some actions of consequences, feels like having a less of a presence. I wouldn't want to replace Renly, but I wouldn't fight too hard to keep him. If I were to replace Renly, then I think we could give Balon the boot and give his much more intimidating brother Euron his place. Renly's replacement would be a bit more difficult, but the first 2 that come to my mind would be Fagon or maybe Mance Rayder. Let me know which version of this DLC you would prefer. Now we should remember though, this is a fictional game and I'm trying to run a business and I have other projects that I need to let people know about. For example, 2 other shows. One of them is shit, but still some fucks will eat these characters up. So it makes sense that I would release a Dance of the Dragons DLC, which could have Daemon, Aemon, Criston, Corlys, and Harwin Strong. Though this DLC can also be messed around a bit. Daemon, Aemon, and Criston are must-have characters, but I wouldn't be against replacing Corlys and Harwin. It's just that, as of right now, these 2 are really the only other characters that are more martial. Hugh would be a good option as well, but hasn't really shown off his ability yet in the show, though as a book reader I know that he likes to get down. Another would be Nettles, but I don't recall her ever being shown as much of a fighter, though I was able to force Dany and Melisandre into this game, so I don't see why I couldn't get her in as well. The final DLC is, of course, the Hedge Knight, which would have Duncan, Lionel Baratheon, Aerion Targaryen, Rhaemon, and Stefan Fossaway. Duncan, Lionel, and Aerion are pretty obvious picks. Some might argue with Aerion, but I don't think you can ever have too many smug bastards to put in the ground. Though the Fossaway brothers might be contentious. It's been a hot minute since I read The Hedge Knight, but the conflict between these 2 brothers is one of the first things that I can remember, and I'd like it to be represented in the game, as I imagine it will be a strong B-plot in the upcoming show. But if you wanted to replace those 2 with Baelor and Maegor, I wouldn't put too much of a fight up. And there we go, the roster of my game. Feels like most games are lucky to have this many characters added after initial launch, but hey, let's dip into a bit of fantasy and make one more DLC. But I am way too fucking lazy, so I'll throw it out to you all. What would your final DLC and characters would be a part of it? Would you have an Aegon DLC and have all 5 King Aegons be a part of it? Maybe a Age of Heroes DLC where characters like Bran the Builder or Simon Star Eyes? A Kingsguard DLC where we finally get Arthur Dane into this game along with another 4 options for the Kingsguard? Maybe you don't need a full DLC and just want 1 or 2 more characters. Make sure to let me know who. Until next time though, be safe, and I hope you all have a wonderful night.